Filthy animals like you belong in cages, not courtrooms. The words from Officer Martinez cracked through the air like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even seasoned attorneys, hardened by years of ugly trials, stiffened in their seats. The black woman at the center of it, Amara Johnson, didn't move. Not a blink, not a twitch. But inside, her chest burned, every muscle in her body straining to hold in the firestorm rising within her. She had walked into this courtroom believing the law, at least here, would stand taller than hatred. She had believed against all odds that maybe justice would still mean something. But in that moment, hearing an officer of the law reduce her existence to filth, she felt the floor beneath her shift. Martinez smirked, adjusting the cuffs on his wrist like he owned the room. Two other officers sat just behind him, whispering, chuckling, feeding off the venom he had spilled. They weren't just here to testify. They were here to taunt her, to break her spirit before the jury. The judge cleared his throat, uneasy. Officer Martinez, watch your language in this courtroom. But it was weak, half-hearted. A slap on the wrist for a man who had just spat poison in. Public, the jury shifted in their seats. Some looking horrified, others stone-faced, unreadable. And Amara. She stood straighter, taller. Her voice, when it finally came, was low, steady. Unshaken, Your Honor, she said, locking eyes with the bench. If this is the justice system I am supposed to trust, then let it be written in record that today it failed me. Silence. You could hear the hum of the lights above, the shuffle of someone's shoes in the gallery. Then Martinez laughed. Actually laughed. You think you belong here? Lady, the only seat waiting for you is behind bars. Don't pretend this place was built for you. The crowd buzzed. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, order in this courtroom. But the order was already broken. Amara wasn't a stranger to this. She had grown up in neighborhoods where cops cruised slowly, like predators circling prey. She'd seen friends shoved against walls, seen knees pressed into backs, seen dignity stolen in seconds. And still, she had risen through school. Through nights of studying by candlelight when the lights were cut off. Through college applications where she was told she wasn't the type they were looking for. And now she was here, standing in a courtroom that should have recognized her voice, her truth. But instead, it was stacked against her. Martinez wasn't testifying to facts. He was testifying to a narrative, painting her as aggressive, dangerous, a threat. His words were designed to sink into the jurors' minds like ink stains, spreading fast, impossible to scrub out. And the other officers. They nodded, backed his lies, twisted details to fit the picture they wanted the world to see. A black woman not as a citizen, not as a professional, not even as a human being, but as a problem. Still, Amara refused to flinch. She refused to let them see her break. Her lawyer, David, rose to his feet, fury blazing in his eyes. Your Honor, I move to strike these statements from the record. This is harassment, plain and simple. The judge hesitated. His eyes flicked between the officers and Amara, weighing something invisible. Politics, reputation, power. Motion denied, he said flatly. And just like that, the system confirmed what everyone already knew. The scales were not balanced. The courtroom buzzed louder now. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but everyone knew the story would bleed out by sunset. Amara clenched her fists. She could feel the pressure building, the injustice pressing down on her chest until she could barely breathe. But it wasn't fear that coursed through her veins, it was something sharper, something dangerous. She turned slowly toward Martinez. Their eyes met, and in that second, he realized something he hadn't before. This wasn't a woman who would bend. This wasn't someone he could crush with a slur and a smirk. There was steel in her spine, fire in her gaze, and it rattled him. His smirk faltered just a little, but Amara. She leaned in, voice steady enough to make the whole courtroom lean closer. You'll regret those words. The officer shifted. Uncomfortable, because sometimes it isn't the loudest voice that commands the room. It's the calm one, the steady one, the one that doesn't need to scream to be heard. The trial stumbled forward. Witness after witness, evidence twisted, testimony bent. Martinez kept throwing glances at her, muttering under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, "Should have stayed in your place. You'll be gone by tomorrow. You don't belong in our world." Each jab was meant to tear her down. But every insult only fueled her resolve. The gallery felt it too. Shift. Where at first people saw her as a defendant cornered by authority, now they began to see her as something else. A fighter. A woman standing alone against a wall of uniforms and lies. And still, the system seemed determined to break her. When her attorney objected, he was silenced. When evidence supporting her case was presented, it was dismissed. It was as if the outcome had already been written long before she stepped into the courtroom. But fate doesn't follow scripts. The breaking point came suddenly, as Amara prepared to testify. Martinez leaned over to whisper something vile. The words were venom, dripping with cruelty. No one else could hear, but she did. And before the court could blink, the insult turned into something physical. Martinez's hand shot out, shoving her shoulder, his badge flashing under the lights. Gasps erupted. People leaped from their seats. The black woman they thought was cornered didn't stumble. She didn't fall. She stood firm, and when his hand came again, quicker, sharper this time, a slap that cracked across her face, the room froze. It wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in front of jurors. Not in front of a judge, but it did. The sound echoed like thunder. Amara's cheek burned, but her eyes blazed. For a second, time stopped, and then chaos erupted. Reporters shouted. The gallery screamed. Her lawyer sprang forward, demanding his arrest. Officers scrambled, some moving to shield Martinez, others trying to calm the storm. The judge's gavel banged over and over, but it was useless. Order had been shattered, ripped to pieces by a single act of arrogance and violence, and in the middle of it all stood Amara unbroken, slowly. Deliberately, she reached up, touched her cheek, and then looked at Martinez with an expression that made the room go silent again. No fear. No tears, only defiance. "You just proved my case for me," she said, her voice slicing through the chaos. The jury stared wide-eyed. They had seen it. They couldn't unsee it. Even the judge looked shaken, and Martinez. For the first time that day, he looked uncertain. Because in trying to silence her, he had unleashed something far bigger. What happened next was nothing anyone could have predicted. The judge called for recess. Bailiffs tried to escort Amara out, but she refused to move like a criminal. She walked tall, head high, every step deliberate, while Martinez sat slumped in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead. But outside those courtroom doors, whispers grew. Whispers of corruption, of abuse, of a system cracking under the weight of its own injustice. And as Amara stepped back in after the break, all eyes were on her. She didn't take the defendants. She walked straight past it, straight past the stunned attorneys. And without breaking stride, she climbed the steps toward the bench, toward the judge's chair. Gasps erupted. The judge rose in fury, but even he couldn't mask the tremor in his voice. "What are you doing?" "You can't?" Amara placed her hands on the polished wood, her eyes sweeping the room. "Why not?" she asked, voice ringing out. "If the people sworn to uphold justice are the ones breaking it, then maybe it's time someone else sat in this seat." The courtroom fell into stunned silence, and in that silence, a truth began to bloom. Maybe this wasn't just about one case. Maybe it was about something much bigger. The silence was suffocating. Every eye in the courtroom tracked Amara's every movement as she placed her hands on the judge's bench. The polished wood gleamed under the fluorescent lights. But it wasn't the desk that drew their focus, it was her. A defendant didn't belong here. A black woman, accused and cornered, wasn't supposed to rise above her place. Yet here she was, standing where only power was allowed to stand. The judge sputtered, his face flushing red. "Miss Johnson, step down immediately." But Amara didn't move. She tilted her chin slightly higher, her eyes cutting across the jurors, the attorneys, the officers, the gallery. For the first time since the trial began, The authority in the room didn't radiate from the bench. It radiated from her. "Why is it," she asked, her voice calm but carrying, "that when an officer of the law slaps me across the face, in full view of 12 jurors and a presiding judge, I'm told to sit down and stay silent? Why is it that when he spits hate at me, you call it nothing more than watch your language? But when I raise my voice, when I dare to stand here, suddenly the gavel comes down." The jurors shifted, glancing at one another. Some nodded subtly, as if the question had planted itself deep in their minds. The judge banged the gavel. Bailiffs restrain her. 2 uniformed officers moved forward, heavy boots thudding. Hands reaching for her arms, the gallery gasped. Some rose from their seats, shouting, and then it happened. One bailiff reached out tonely to freeze mid-motion. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but reporters had their pens, their voices, their access. The moment Amara was dragged away, story wouldn't just leave these walls, it would explode across the city. The bailiff hesitated. Everyone could see it. Amara turned her head slightly, looking directly at him. Not pleading, not afraid. "Just steady. Do it," she whispered, loud enough for the gallery to hear. "Put your hands on me, too. Prove to them all that this is how the law treats truth." The officer froze, sweat dotting his forehead. His hand hovered inches from her arm, then fell to his side. The judge's face blazed. "What are you waiting for? Remove her." But the second officer stepped back. "Your Honor," he stammered, with all due respect. The jury saw everything. "If we touch her now, we'll look worse than Martinez." The room erupted with murmurs. Martinez shot up from his seat, his pride wounded, his voice trembling with rage. "This is my courtroom, not hers. Don't you see what she's doing? She's manipulating you all." "She's enough," Amara cut in, her voice slicing through his tirade. "If this were your courtroom, Officer Martinez, justice would have died long ago. But today, something different will happen." The gallery roared, some with cheers, some with shouts of outrage. The judge pounded the gavel so hard it nearly cracked. Word spread fast. By the time the recess ended, the courthouse was surrounded. Protesters held signs. Reporters shouted into microphones, their vans lining the streets. "Black woman defies judge." Courtroom chaos erupts. Officer, accused of assaulting defendant in front of jury. Inside, tension thickened. Amara returned, her lawyer trailing beside her, looking more like an ally than an advocate now. He whispered urgently, "Amara, you've got the nation's eyes on you. But if you push too far, they'll bury you before this trial even ends." She stopped walking, turned to him. "They've been trying to bury me my whole life," she said softly. "But every time, I climbed out. This time, I'm not just climbing and building something they can't cover with dirt." David stared at her, stunned. Then he nodded. "Then let's burn their script." Back inside, the judge looked worn, his hands trembling as he shuffled papers. The jury filed in, their faces etched with the weight of what they'd witnessed. Amara didn't take the defendant's seat. She stood beside her lawyer, unflinching. The prosecutor tried to regain control, standing tall, voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, don't be swayed by theatrics. The law's clear. The evidence against this woman is undeniable." "Undeniable," Amara interrupted. "Or inconvenient." Gasps again. The prosecutor scowled. "Miss Johnson, you don't get to address this jury directly. That's not how it works." She turned slowly toward the jury, ignoring him. "That's not how it's supposed to work. But you've seen how things work here. Rules that bend for them, and rules that crush people like me." The prosecutor slammed his fist on the table. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." The judge lifted his gavel, but hesitated. The courtroom wasn't his anymore. Everyone could feel it. Then came the breaking storm. Martinez, fuming, could no longer contain himself. He lunged to his feet, pointing at her, spittle flying as he shouted, "She's a liar. She attacked me first. You just didn't see it." She, Enoughh. The word thundered from Amara before the judge could speak. It wasn't just volume, it was the authority behind it. For a second, the room believed her word carried more weight than the man who technically ruled it. She took a step forward, her voice steady. "If you think I'm the liar here, Officer Martinez, then explain this. Why did you strike me in plain sight of a jury? Why, if I was such a threat, did you feel the need to silence me with your hand?" He froze, his mouth open then closed. No excuse came. The jury leaned forward. Reporters' pens scratched furiously, and Amara pressed harder. "You thought your badge was a shield? You thought your word would bury mine. But today, the world saw who you are. You didn't just slap me, you slapped every promise this system ever made about fairness, about equality, about justice. And the people outside, they won't forget it. Neither will this jury." The gallery erupted in cheers. Officers rushed to quiet them. Martinez's face drained of color, because in that moment, he realized something terrifying. He had lost control. The judge finally stood, slamming the gavel until it cracked the wood beneath. "This trial is suspended until further notice." Chaos. Reporters bolted for the exits to get the story out first. Protesters outside roared louder. Officers scrambled to escort the judge out as if his own bench had turned against him. And Amara? She stood there, unmoved, eyes blazing. For the first time, the system didn't feel untouchable. It felt fragile, breakable, human. Her lawyer whispered urgently, "Amara, they'll come after you harder now. This isn't over. This is just the beginning." She nodded slowly. "Good. Let them come. The louder they fight, the clearer the truth becomes." Hours later, footage of Amara's defiance dominated every channel. News anchors debated. Activists rallied. Crowds outside the courthouse swelled, chanting her name. Martinez hid from cameras, his reputation collapsing by the hour. The judge faced scrutiny for his silence. The entire justice system found itself under a microscope it had never wanted, and at the center of it all stood Amara, woman they tried to break, who instead rose high enough to touch the very seat they swore she could never reach. The final blow came days later. During an emergency hearing called to restore order, the courtroom was packed tighter than ever. Overflowing with journalists, officials, citizens, the judge looked weary, his authority eroded. Martinez sat stone-faced, lawyers whispering frantically around him. And then Amara entered. The gallery rose to its feet, applause crashing against the walls. She didn't walk to the defendant's table. She didn't walk to her lawyer. She walked straight to the center of the room, where every eye could see her. The judge cleared his throat, voice trembling. "Miss Johnson, if you wish to speak, you'll have to know," she said firmly, her voice carrying to every corner. "Today I don't speak as a defendant. Today I speak as the people you failed to protect. Today, I speak as the proof that your silence can no longer cover their violence." The gallery roared. Cameras snapped. Martinez shifted in his seat, his hands shaking. The judge tried to regain control, but his gavel barely made a dent in the noise. And in that chaos, Amara turned her eyes directly to the jurors. "You have a choice," she said, her voice steady, commanding. "You can let them bury me. Or you can stand with me and bury the lies instead. Either way, this moment won't be forgotten. Because no matter what verdict you hand down, the world has already seen the truth." The courtroom exploded with cheers. Chants, uproar, and in that instant, it wasn't the judge or the officers, or even the law that owned the room. It was her, Amara Johnson, the woman they tried to silence. The woman they tried to break had taken the judge's seat in more ways than one, and the system would never look the same again.